Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. This is Stuart Cohen. I'm the president of IGI Cyber Labs. I want to thank you for attending today's session. As you know, for the last year and a half, we've been running the Nodeware Cybersecurity Thought Leadership webinar series. It has always been, a public service announcement with the idea of educating MSPs and small business leaders as to what they can do to be better prepared, what they can do to be better protect the critical data, some things that MSPs can do for small businesses, and some things that small businesses ought to be asking from their MSPs, as the world evolves, as it relates to regulatory environments, frequency of attacks, compliance entities, whatever it might be. They've always been open forums. Today, we're going to kind of expand what has been our normal process. We're adding a couple of great partners with us, Auvik and HacWare, to talk specifically about security through visibility and awareness. I'll get right to it. Let me introduce the three panelists for you, and then we'll get to today's discussion. We're fortunate enough to have John Harden with us. As you may know, he was the co-founder of SaaSleo, now part of Auvik. We had him on one of our sessions about a year ago, so it'll be great to catch up with him and hear some of the things as he sees the world evolving as it relates to SaaSleo and some of the things that Auvik is up to as well. We're also fortunate to have Juan Fernandez with us. He is the global channel chief at HacWare, and our own Frank Raimondi is with us, who's our vice president of channel alliances and strategic partnerships. So first of all, the three of you, thanks so much for being with us today. There's a lot going on in the marketplace. We were just talking about, changes in businesses and business relationships. So let's just get right into it and start with kind of, the recent trends as you're seeing it in both kind of recent trends in cybersecurity, the different pressures being put on small businesses, and the different requirements that that MSPs are having to step up to, to support those new requirements. So, Juan, maybe we'll start with you, and then we'll just kind of take it from there. Do me a favor, before you answer, I would like to say, if anybody has any questions, please put them in the chat, put them in the question box. We'll do our best to get to every single one of these. We're also recording this, so we'll be able to get a copy of the recording out to you. We'll get an email out to everybody. So anybody that didn't get a chance to attend will be able to watch the recording. And if you have a question and an answer comes out that you want to make sure you can go back and review, that recording will be available to you as well. So if you get a chance, put your questions in so we can make this as collaborative as possible. And with that, Juan, I'll come back to you to just kind of kick it off on, some of the challenges, some of the issues, some of the trends facing businesses and facing the MSPs that need to, want to, and have to support them.
Yeah, and I appreciate you having me, and thank you for this wonderful panel. I know these fine gentlemen, and I am really truly honored to be here. But to your point, one of the big things that we're seeing, obviously with this, the command and control eroding, right? And now we have these knowledge workers that are distributed in this hybrid work environment. One of the big things is the human-centric element, right? I heard something yesterday, we're trying to secure the edge, and the edge is now undefined. The edge is everywhere, right? And so one of the big things that I'm seeing as a trend is, and this is something that is early in its stages, but as you start to see like artificial intelligence injecting itself into the realities in which we're, living in this world, deep fakes are becoming a real big thing. And obviously at HacWare, we're all about phishing and cybersecurity awareness and training the end user to spot these things. But the deep fake thing is really becoming a big thing, right? Where we're seeing, phishing simulations and spear phishing and a lot of different tactics that are actually coming at people from a number of different ways, like smishing and others, which is causing the MSP to have to pivot really fast, right? Because all of a sudden there's something that was just landing in the junk mail is now becoming a really big deal, right? And it's causing deep financial loss for companies, and industries are all around. And so that pivot is having to really make, have the MSPs, or the modern MSP, as I say it, protect the new world very fast. And I think that is an opportunity. And I called, 2023 the year of education for not just our customers, MSP customers, but also our MSPs customers, right? Where MSPs are taking this knowledge back to their customer and becoming that trusted advisor. And that's where I think a lot of the opportunity lies, is it's just coming really, really, really fast. And an interesting study that I saw recently was that Gartner released it a couple of days ago, is that by 2025, the consumerization of AI fraud will fundamentally change the attacks.
Uh-oh. Hotel Wi-Fi might be kicking in.
Driving more enterprises and small businesses, to look for, out. Now, when you, what's that? Oh, I thought I heard somebody say something there, but that's an interesting trend to think about, right? And when you think about what's changing and that how it's going to completely shift, we have to be shifting immediately and turning toward, these new approaches as well. So I'll leave it to John. What are your thoughts? What are you seeing?
Hey, John, before you start, Juan, you cut out for a second. You might want to repeat what the part that Gartner released, just so everybody catches it on the recording.
Oh yeah. Yeah, the study released that by 2025, the consumerization of AI-enabled fraud will fundamentally change the attack surface for managed service providers, driving more outsourcing requirements for cybersecurity and a focus on security education and awareness. And that is a hard and fast rule, right? They're saying like the problem is so vast and so fast and it's coming so quick that our new focus will be cybersecurity awareness and education. And that's a strong statement from Gartner. So when I saw that, I was staggered to see that, man, it's that big of a deal and it's moving that quick that we have to run that fast.
Yeah, that's scary for sure.
John, your perspective on that?
Yeah, I have to agree. I mean, obviously, you can't disagree with Gartner, but you have to recognize the problem that Juan highlights here, right? I think AI is definitely changing the game, right? I don't think anymore it's just a couple news articles and everybody's having fun with ChatGPT, for instance, but that doesn't mean that that's where it starts and where it stops. I think you have to have awareness training around it. You have to understand the benefit, like what's happening. Your end customer has to be educated. And Juan, you made the comment, 2023 is the year of education. I can't agree with you more there. I was going to relay into the CompTIA 2023 State of the Channel survey that I think came out a couple of weeks ago. In 2022, the #1 most requested service from customers up to their MSP was cybersecurity services. And right behind that, storage and backup, behind that, data analytics. And then where I come into play here with the representation of Auvik and our offering of Auvik SaaS management really is the #4 item on that survey, which was SaaS application management. Customers are asking their actual partners to help solve those problems. And I think that we're seeing these really as external trends because of this whole, I think the wave is finally settling in from work from home and hybrid. These are no longer like theoreticals. We're done kind of quickly shifting and changing, but as a result, everybody's now responding to the fact of the new reality and taking advantage of it from a cyber perspective. And so we all kind of have to just assume this is the new normal. And Juan, you use the edge, the edge here at Auvik, we call it the new last mile. This is where I get work done. This isn't an office. You get work done at a hotel, Juan. Like we all get work done everywhere. And the cybersecurity actors don't start and stop in the office, and they don't start and stop at home. And it just now takes a holistic approach. And so I think from my perspective, that's where the visibility part of this circle comes in, right? Like knowing what's there and knowing what the edge is and knowing what's on the edge is more critical than ever. And I'm sure, Frank, you have an opinion of knowing what's on the edge.
Yeah, no, well, yeah, we do identify that clearly with sort of the asset identification. But I think kind of going back to our 3 points, right? The summary of your two guys' points really comes back to these 3 things of awareness, identity, and sort of profiling and the visibility of what is on that network. Sometimes I think, holy mackerel, how is somebody going to keep up with this, right? If you're a smaller MSP and there's these new twists and turns, and the customers, the ones that have been fighting forever to do an MFA, right, or to do some vulnerability scanning, or to, you know, just kind of some of the basics, like the car dealerships, right? Kind of looking back to the, you know, this whole FTC safeguards ruling and what that means for the most basic of users of technology, right? They have the most susceptible data, right? And so, you know, if they're not doing the elements, I hadn't thought too far through on what the AI stuff can mean, but you know, it doesn't take a whole lot of imagination to imagine what the creative bad guys are doing with it.
Yeah.
Right? And you know how they're, you know, I mean, again, Ron, to your point with HacWare, in terms of your training and awareness of how do you train somebody when they've gotten to that next level of appearance, right? Of a good email, or you know, the websites that look like they're something, right, but they're really something else beyond it. So
Yeah.
It's a good, well, I don't know if it's a good thing for anybody, but it, you know, for some of us vendors that provide some of these security solutions, it's an important and it's a growing area. But I feel bad for the MSPs, and particularly the end users are trying to protect, right?
Yeah.
Their questions are keep coming up, right? And kind of, I think, Stuart, to your original question, the things that I was thinking about that are, you know, the trends, and it's been there a bit, but you know, whether it's the insurance or the FTC requirements or compliance and auditing, you know, things from you know, HIPAA as an example, or other groups that are requiring these things to keep them protected. It's going to be an ever challenging and you know, thought-provoking exercise. It's going to be nonstop.
Well, you know, I'll give you a great example. I was on a call this morning, right? That a car dealership, a significantly large car dealership, had run a pen test in order to meet the FTC safeguard requirement. They ran the pen test, and one of their dealerships happens to be a BMW dealership, and BMW came back and said, no, the pen test is a one-time event. You cannot run the pen test, even though you met the FTC safeguard and feel like our data is secure. You need to be running continuous vulnerability management because BMW is concerned their data is not secure. So it's interesting, BMW was dictating to the car dealership what they needed to do to protect the BMW data, you know, separate and distinct from the customer data. So it's interesting how, and now these MSPs that are supporting these car dealerships are having to evolve to answer all of these type questions. And I just think it gets us to the, you know, the next question, which is, you know, how can the MSPs adopt to all of the changes that are coming at them, and, you know, the different client requirements from the different industry verticals? So you're all nodding your head. So, you know, John, maybe we'll let you go first on this.
There's a long list of what they have to do, right?
Yeah. So Stuart, I do want to add one point. I will get to your answer. We're working actually with a large car dealership too. I'd be curious to see how you guys are slicing and dicing this, and how we can all work together and do a better job. But I remind MSPs that yes, we've got this like laser focus on car dealerships right now because they came under the new FTC safeguards. But you better bet that's not the end of it, right? Like, give it a year, give it 2 years. All these businesses are going to eventually get wrapped into new requirements and compliance requirements. It doesn't matter anymore what you are. If you're holding any sensitive data, whether there's a 4-letter acronym protecting that data or not, there will be one. So when I think of that, I think of the fact that we're all moving towards this regulation. And if I had to say, if I was building an MSP right now, you know, every one of my customers would have a full regulation stack and compliance stack and security stack. I wouldn't care what they were and whether they wanted it. That would be a requirement for me. And don't mind my video going off. That's the latest and greatest from the Mac OS update. What I would be doing is focusing on making sure all my clients have a compliance stack, but I would find one that I really believed I can lean into. You know, my personal opinion is that CIS controls are a really good control list to work against. It's prescriptive, it's definitive, and you take that list and you look at that list and you go, okay, ding, 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 ding. I have a gap here, I have a gap here, I have a gap here, but I cover these other areas. Let me fill these gaps. and keep up with the framework. Don't try to be everything for everybody, but choose something that you can define and you can deploy and you can secure and be that and deliver that package unilaterally, because then you're at least tightening up all the areas. You don't need, I always make the analogy like machine guns and turrets and everything on the front lawn with mines and everything sitting there, but you leave the back door open. Like, try to get some basic coverage, go IG1, then IG2. You don't have to just keep protecting the endpoint or keep protecting one area. Look at all the IG controls and try to evolve. Don't just think, wow, this is new shiny technology, I'm going to put it on an endpoint, protect it. That's my opinion.
I think to that point, sort of just utilizing the controls, right? There's things that you're never, an MSP, us within security companies, we're never going to know. But the government organizations like CIS and NIST are doing those on our behalf, right? So let's utilize the resources that are there. Don't try and reinvent the ocean if it's just crazy. So no, I like the idea of looking at the CIS controls. Like within our product, right? We've identified, I think, 4 points within the CIS controls that are specifically being addressed by the deliverables from Nodeware, right? So if you're a vendor, you need to do that. From an MSP, you need to say, it's back to the discussion with your customer, right? What's their risk balance and their budget balance, right? What do they want to do? Okay, well, some of it's they're not going to have a choice, like the car dealers. Other folks might have a choice, and they're going to have to do that balancing act. But at least if you can go with them and say, hey, here's the 10 things that if you want to be as good as you can be, you need all these 10. Well, we can only do 7. Okay, well, let's prioritize those. Let's get those going, get those done. Then maybe we can do 8, 9, and 10.
Yeah, and I've said this for a long time. Owning my own MSP, one of the things that I was preaching back in 2018 was be careful about offering cybersecurity services if you can't pass the cybersecurity audit yourself. Yeah. Right? I mean, the liability that you absorb from putting out cybersecurity products without having yourself trued up is probably something you should pay attention to. And I was very cautious about that. And even back then, in early 2015, I was looking at cybersecurity frameworks and looking to SOC up, create a SOC and get SOC 2 certified inside of our organization, because we were looking to offer cybersecurity products, but I want to understand the limits and liability of offering those products and services. So I will say, to your point, John, I love what you said, because yes, look internally first before running to just grabbing a product and running out and trying to offer it. I mean, make sure that your contracts are copacetic and that you have everything lined up and that you're actually taking very slow steps to this approach, because the one thing that you don't want to do is land up getting sued and being deposed for, saying, we're offering a certain amount of cybersecurity or protection or something, and they come back and say, how do you offer this, but you couldn't do any of that, right? So, internally, when was the last time you did a risk assessment? Internally, when did you do these things? Like, it's a good place to true yourself up. So, to the question, how can we adapt and stay ahead of the curve? Again, back to those, NIST and CIS controls and CMMC, whatever you're doing, at least start there so that you can address those concerns. And also, just be able to speak to those internally and document those processes. It's a good exercise.
So let's talk a little bit more about that. I came from the Fortune 2000 world of cybersecurity, and there were all these issues about stop wasting time with the firewall, because the firewall is meaningless because everybody can get in so many different ways, right? And that was the conversation, 3 and 4 years ago, right? But now it's interesting as people talk about, endpoint detection, and they talk about continuous vulnerability and proactive versus defensive. Maybe you can talk about, let's talk about the role of visibility in detecting and preventing these cyber attacks. Juan, once again, everybody's shaking their head. Juan, we'll let you go first.
Yeah, and I think that that was one of my favorite things to do. And again, I'm tapping into my previous life where I was an MSP, and one of the things that I loved to show the customer was using a product. And I hate to do this, but I'm going to have to plug Auvik because I actually used to use it, right? And so I would show the customer where all these data map points were on their environment, and I'd show them where the risk was, and I'd show them, using other tools where their concern was, and I could physically show them what we needed to do to move them forward. And visibility speaks to a customer way more than any PowerPoint presentation I ever put down. I could tell them about the process that I was delivering. I could tell them about the way I was going to transform them. But when I showed them their environment live and I said, here it is, brass tacks, this particular PC right here that's running right here, look at the vulnerabilities that are on that thing. That thing is so high. I mean, it shouldn't even be on any regular network at all. Like, considering the limits of what you're supposed to be compliant with, I'm not going to say anything because I can't certify this, but you're way out of line, right? So, I mean, that's the thing, right? So visibility is a very strong tool for managed service providers, that when they're looking to be able to illustrate those things in very, a picture, they say a picture's 1,000 words. That's 100% true, right? So when you could show a customer that they have that level of risk without saying anything, it takes it out of your control. Well, what all these friction points of, well, what do you mean I'm risky? It's
well,
right.
we have so many cases where, we've heard from the MSP saying, they're in the discussions, prospecting, and say, we have 50 employees. Oh, I think we've got 75 devices. That's about right. Yeah, a couple printers, whatever, right? We do a quick scan, and minimally it's 2 to 1, right? There's at least 100 devices on that network, if not 150 in many cases, right? It's two, sometimes 3 assets, right? Again, they forgot about the cameras that they might have connected. They forgot about their thermostat. They forgot about, 10 different things, or just the five servers or 5 notebooks they had running in the closet that, oh yeah, I forgot those were there. So, I mean, again, back to that visibility, one of just identifying it, as you said, putting it on a map or a list and say, hey, we found all these devices. We also did this scan, realized, wow, there's some 5-year-old or systems with haven't been patched or updated in 5 years. How many there's probably, I think, 20 to, I forget the number, but it's in dozens of new vulnerabilities found every day, right, and reported, that are put into the common database and the common things that are 2-3 years old, systems that haven't been patched. And it's just like, wow, that visibility, again, back to the physical device, but then what's inside that device, or what's not in that device is just as appropriate. And that's what, again, the product plug is on the Nodeware, right, where we can identify the assets and get a clear visibility into what the status there is of those, because it's scary. And John, your element just goes that level further.
Back to when I was in my MSP, I wish I had that, because I was using something that wasn't supposed to be used for that, because there wasn't a tool back then for it. So I'm glad that you guys are doing that. I love what you guys are doing, because it does just what we were talking about. And I love the fact that there's finally visibility to illustrate those components.
Well, and not only the visibility, but the continuous visibility, right? Because there's 20 and dozens new ones every day. If you can't do it once a month, right? You can't do it once a quarter scan. It's got to be daily, just running all the time without having to think about scheduling. Just do it, right? It's just being done, and you can always kind of get alerts and understanding what's going on. Sorry, John, cut you off there.
No worries. This is a good conversation. I agree with you. One of the statements that I teach the managed service providers that I work with. So Frank, obviously, I can appreciate the plug, right? It is a great tool for visibility on all the assets out there. And quite frankly, there's no conversation around security without visibility. You have to know what's there, whether it's an appliance case where you have to know who the people are that are a potential risk that need trained, whether it's the assets on the network, whether it's the software on the computer, or whether it's the SaaS they're adopting. You have to know what it is. Like, before you can do anything, you can't just be taking a shot in the dark. But to that degree, post visibility, I like teaching the partners that I work with, because in my world, I focus on SaaS visibility and all the shadow IT and the things that employees are signing up for. You want to talk about ChatGPT? There's a hell.
I think there's probably half of the audience probably just cringed a little bit, like, oh yeah.
Well, seeing you in the hotel room one, I'm just thinking, okay, he could be doing it there, and who knows where that connection's going to.
Oh yeah.
You remember, is it Price is Right? The little Yoda lady guy, up and to the right? Yeah, that's the ChatGPT metrics for us right now. We're watching, but the point is that, like, I mean, I'll just take that as it's an easy freebie point, right? Like, if you don't know that people are using ChatGPT, they might be putting data in there that you don't know about. And it's a point of why you need to know all the things out in the ecosystem, because that employee's going to be doing it whether you want them to or not. And the point isn't, again, to slap the wrists, but my question I give MSPs, I've kind of hinted towards it, now I'll give it to you, is show them what's there and just simply ask, is there anything here that's not supposed to be here? Is there anything here that's a surprise? Is there anything here that you were unaware of? And in our case, it's at least fairly loaded in the sense that there's so much shadow IT in the SaaS ecosystem that
they have no clue. I mean,
what do you say? Like when you had 115 apps for 40 people, like what are you supposed to say? But I think that's a good way to flip the conversation back onto the responsibility of the business owner that of your customers. Like, okay, you've got all these things in your environment that you're unaware of. We're just discovering it, but we're going to have to do a journey of remediation. And that's why visibility is so critical, because you need to help translate to the customer why it matters. And having something to show them about all the different things that are impacting them helps them connect in their head that, okay, this is a risk that I can't just pawn off to my MSP. I'm part of the story too.
Well, and we've seen MSPs when they kind of start deploying Nodeware and they think about their concerns, right? Because they are, to your point, they're finding these things that they didn't realize, right? Or they, the customer underestimated or just didn't know what was physically on the network, or in your case, what was being used on a individual's system to access and to just be connected to the cloud. And that sort of just, again, the visibility is just eye-opening, right? And they, it's just there's just so much there. It's just so impactful that it's scary that if you're an MSP and not doing some kind of a really good visibility and identity, sort of tool, and catching up on vulnerabilities, because that is the first point of entry for a bad guy is looking at what systems are out there, and they know what's on your network, right? And they might, when a vulnerability is announced, we've heard, within 15-20 minutes, the hackers are working on, okay, who do we know that has those systems? Where can we get in, and what can we go take advantage of? So there's no time to waste, for sure. Once you know something, and you can't say, well, I don't want to know it because then I become liable. No, you're going to become liable one way or the other. So,
that's 100% true.
Yeah.
Let's maybe it's worth exploring a little bit of that. We see a lot of people that transition from a monthly scan or a quarterly scan with a monthly or quarterly assessment, where they kind of take a snapshot of where they are, and then the MSP uses that to educate their clients. But to your point, right, the shelf life of those things are measured in hours probably. And so maybe we can transition a little bit to maybe some potential kind of case studies that you have. We talked a little bit about the dealership and how BMW told the dealership what the dealership needed to do. BMW didn't really care so much about what the FTC thought was fair, right? So maybe we should transition a little bit to some of the case studies about, where you've seen the importance of visibility and where it's, provided a, either a quantifiable benefit, or if nothing else, a the lights come on experience for people.
I'll go. One of the big, go ahead, John.
I was just going to joke that this could be the next 30 minutes, but go on. I'm sorry.
How many different scenarios do we have here of visibility? And I'll just go back to the kind of my initial topic, kind of coming in from the other side of the lens on the MSP side. Even one of the big things, as far as visibility goes, I mean, it's interesting enough when you take that, those scenarios, those case studies. I don't think that there's probably a customer out there that we could run a scan on in their environment and we wouldn't find everything that we were worried about. I'm pretty sure that's the case. I say this all the time. We all got on the information superhighway with a Yugo with a cracked windshield and a flat tire, and we just cruised around and just bumped into things as we went through it. And it's like, oh, I'll just buy a new, Yugo, another used car to get on the internet. Like, there's no real good way to say that we have a good cyber posture. And so I'm pretty sure that any environment that we go hit, I would bet, guys, that probably over 80% of environments are probably open to pretty much any kind of threat. I mean, as far as what we're looking at from a visibility perspective, there's probably something in every environment that we could learn from, especially I know John, you guys monitoring the SaaS apps, like that's without any admin requirements to install SaaS apps nowadays. I literally, there's probably millions inside of an organization, right? So to your point, I don't have any dedicated case studies, but I'm sure John, you do.
Oh yeah, that's why I said we can take the next 30 minutes, but I'll give two, and I'll come from different because Stuart, you said quantifiable. We here on this call and probably the attendees understand that reducing business risk is quantifiable to dollars, but I can tell stories where it's quantifiable to dollars and quantifiable to security risk. The first case would be an organization that we did a survey on where 300-400 person company. They work in the PHI space. They have a lot of personal health information that's really critical that cannot be just thrown out willy-nilly. And most of their organization was compliant except for this subsect of like 8 people that had found Airtable was a really good solution to do some automation with. If you're unfamiliar with Airtable, think of it like a Smartsheet or just a really smart version of Google Spreadsheets or Excel. But Airtable lets you automate. And so this team had found that Airtable would take the PHI data that they needed, translate it into a handful of ways that they need it. And over the course of 6 to 8 months, they had built all these processes around put the data here, Airtable does its magic, and out comes what they need. Well, Airtable's not HIPAA compliant. Not in its base package, by the way, not what they were paying for. So quantifiably, what they were paying for ended up being about $80,000 a year to the business owner because the company, this small subsect, wasn't paying $80,000. I think they were paying like $1,000 a year because they were on the just normal cloud. But as soon as they moved up to that HIPAA cloud, it was about $80,000 a year because the business owner didn't know they had this data in Airtable. This business team had adopted all their practices, all their scale, all their operations around this component. And the option was to spend 80 grand ripping it out and implementing something new, or just spending 80 grand on Airtable. So a survey, unfortunately, is going to end up, protecting the company, but it's going to cost that business owner who could have preemptively, you talk about real time knowing, like instead of waiting till Airtable's in the throes of the company costing them 80 grand, could have captured that and stopped that in the front. And another story, I'll be quicker on this one, was we surveyed a organization. They're about 500 people. They've got about 30 employee pockets of distributed locations, and they're in the recruitment space. And we did a survey across that, and we found that each of these entities had self-adopted software solutions to actually solve their business problem for recruitment. There were about 20 different recruitment tools across the entire gamut. And each entity was running fine and operationally, but our MSP came in, showed them that they had 20 tools. They ended up selling them a $250,000 project to consolidate all the tools into one SaaS offering. They were able to increase efficiency. They were able to reduce labor, as well as get all the data into a single point. And so, one is a cost savings. One was a security issue that ended up being a cost loss. But knowing this is where the battle begins. Back to that visibility point, knowing early helps so much.
Yeah, I was just thinking back to John when we started talking last year, some point, and you were telling me about your program. I started thinking, how many people signed up for an individual Dropbox as an example, right? And so, one of the issues of where you're putting your data, that's a different topic. That's along the same vein here, but just 20 people buying an individual license versus a corporate license for 20, just the savings, because they're going to expense that anyway. So, I just love that visibility producing, cost savings.
Mm-hmm. Love that.
Yeah.
So without spending 30 more minutes talking about the case studies, I think it's worth talking about, maybe security awareness, right? And how do you do security awareness, whether it's educating the MSPs as to things they ought to be thinking about, right? Let's start there, right? Or educating the SMB leaders as to things they ought to be aware of, or how the MSPs can help them with things they've already, some board members, some investors, some supply channel, ask them about. And then we can talk about, the SMB clients themselves and the actual employees. Maybe we talk a little bit about security awareness training and how do you do different layers of training for different, places in the ecosystem, if you will.
Sure. Do you guys want me to lead that one?
Oh,
Sure.
I think here's the biggest thing, right? A new mission requires new talent, right? And I talk about us protecting this new modern world. And it's all of us here, right? We're all protecting it in some new fashion. But the real thing is really introducing a human-centric security design, right? Because now it's past the opportunity of us using technology to stop them from doing things. There's a reason why we all have businesses here, right? This new ecosystem is this new world, and this new ecosystem is allowing end users to access data in ways that we cannot control. Right. So the way we have to do that is implementing this new human-centric security design, right? So we're going to start going beyond the edge and start protecting infinity, right? We have to start educating that component of it. And I think that that's where MSPs have to become the leaders to formalize and really start becoming educators. That's why I call 2023 the year of education, right? And I think it's just, going back to the consistency and the training about the products and services and the way they work. We have to learn a new way to do things, and we have to run because now it's moving super fast, right? So really taking time to actually implement security awareness training to our own company, not just from phishing and cybersecurity awareness, but also all of our products and services. Like, how do we do things? Again, back to those checklists and those frameworks, and like, how do we have a process to deliver some sort of cybersecurity compliance or, requirement or regulation compliant? All of those things have to be topical for the MSP. And then transverse to that is like, hey, here's the story, right? This is what we did inside of our organization, and this is how it impacted us. This is how we're more protected, and this is why it's important for us as a business owner. And this is why we're making changes to our contracts, and this is why we're changing those limits and liabilities in our talks with you, right? This is why we're requiring you to have these certain products and services, because we are not only implementing, but we're also educating, right? And so I think from the MSP's perspective, that's one big part of it. And I think, internally, like for HacWare, what we've done is we've gone outside of that phishing and cyber, awareness training, right? We're actually into PCI and HIPAA and other types of training where MSPs can also get that and then subscribe that to their customers, right? They can consume it, they can learn it internally. What should we be doing? Implementing those cybersecurity awareness options, and then also pushing that out to their customers as well for their insurance and compliance regulations, right? So us as vendors, I think, are taking a step forward to assist the MSP on that journey because we recognize that that is a gap. But I think that, the lion's share and the load of it is still the managed service provider. A, to number one, take the leadership role on that. B, look for resources to get that education. And then C, to take that and actually turn that into, their business approach, whether it's, our stack of us three sitting here and, educating the end user on all the risks and opportunities within an organization, and really transacting that into return on investment for their organization. I think that there's just those couple approaches I think are really meaningful. But what do you other guys think?
Hey, before we go to that, one of the questions, I pick a number, 50,000, 40,000, 60,000 MSPs, right?
Sure.
How in the world is the MSP owner that, wakes up going, I need to be smarter about this? How do they figure out how to get smarter?
How do they figure out how to get smarter?
Or where do they go to get smarter?
Well, I think they could come to us. I mean, we do cybersecurity sales masterclasses all the time. This podcast, this webinar, right? Podcasts, webinars, whatever we're doing, like these are places where we can learn, peer groups and others. Like I'm at, ConnectWise Share right now. I was at WatchGuard's partner event yesterday. Like there's a lot of people that are out there that are willing to help and share, and it's just tapping into that ecosystem to just learn.
Yeah.
Right. And just get that education. I know you guys have a ton of resources. Maybe you can name a few that you offer.
Okay, John, I know you're ready to go.
I'm going to have to do my shameless CompTIA plug. And I know Juan's in for this one. I know everybody's on this one. I think everybody's
all in on CompTIA for sure.
All on CompTIA, but I mean, it actually did floor me after having spent, I've spent about 15 plus years in MSP or the SaaS side of the MSP world. when I joined CompTIA, it actually blew me away with the amount of actual content that they have and have actually produced for the channel. Everything from vendor selection checklists to how to go to market in the MSP vendor ecosystem. Like, it is actually pretty impressive. And to me, it's one of the best kept secrets out there for MSPs as far as resources go.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, even today, I was sat on part of the community meeting, the member meeting this morning. They were talking about the marketing toolkit, right? That they have that MSPs can take advantage of just to get again, the MSPs, they might worry about, well, what am I going to say? How am I going to say it? Well, it's there, right? You just, again, come to you as a resource is one of them.
One of the resources that I was going to share a little bit later, you cut me off at the pass there, John, but they have a new one that just came out this morning. I thought was ironic timing. It's how to get customers to stop clicking phishing emails. Right, and that's something that they just published this morning. I thought it was ironic timing, and I of course have to read through it, but it's a really great resource. CompTIA has a ton of opportunities. I actually am part of the communities as well. So anybody that's interested, ping me on LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to intro to you and have you join the MSP community and find out more about some of the new stuff like cybersecurity, the new cybersecurity trust mark, and a bunch of different communities that are available.
That's why I said it was a freebie. We're all CompTIA folks
yeah,
here.
we're all.
That's bad. We're all in here to make to help some customers and make some money along the way, and we got to know what people have available.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that does actually. Last addition, without joking here, with Juan's point, is that you said you're over there at ConnectWise. Like, the reality is you got to be in the community. If you're an MSP business owner and you're waking up and you go, how can I be better? Everybody knows the age-old adage of you're the 5 people you spend your time the most with. But the reality is you are, and so you need to be surrounding yourself with peers and better folks. And so being out at industry conferences, I don't care which conference you go to, but the amount of knowledge that I would say me, Juan, Frank, Stuart have in these areas isn't because we're smart, just because we've been involved in the community and we're listening and we're learning and we're constantly hungry around these topics. And so just being in the community is just such a huge step.
Well, yeah, it's actually, it's actually interesting just being at a number of shows already this year, but just the times last year where, MSP comes up and they're, talking to what do you have? And, oh, I've kind of thought about that, but I haven't really gotten to that yet. But the number of, sort of the downside of that is that they come to a show and there's 30 new vendors that they hadn't heard of before, or maybe it's 20 different pieces of technology or the security stack that they get excited about, and then they go away. And this is really the hard part, both for us as vendors, but the MSP in particular, is they come back and, okay, well, business, I've been gone a few days, I need to do these 3 things. And then the list of new things kind of keeps dropping off the list. So the discipline from an MSP, I think, is really a critical element that they just, they got to know, because they got to spend the time. It's an investment in their time. May not be in a dollar investment yet, but it's definitely got to be an investment in time to be at events, to be in the peer groups, to hear what somebody else did. And, just by hearing what a peer did, and, across the country, so there's no competitive issues, but just to hear, I did these 3 things. So that just saved that MSP 50 hours, right, of research and, defining what it is that needs to be done. So.
I wanted to put this chart back up because we have 15 minutes. I want to go back to the MSP or the small business that's only providing IT and desktop support, right? And it's the small business it knows they got to do more, but doesn't quite know where to start. And the MSP knows they need to be providing more than just IT support and desktop support, because 1, it's not sustainable, and the reality is some other MSP is going to come take that client and provide them all the cybersecurity services anyway. So let's go back to kind of this chart and maybe talk a little bit about what are a couple of things SMBs that are only getting desktop support today, what's their jumping off point, right? And MSP, how do you nudge them along, or tell them, I'm not keeping you if you're not doing cybersecurity services, because I don't want the risk when you get hacked and you come think, I am doing a bunch of things I'm not doing, right?
Yeah.
Taking the cynical
Well,
side.
I think that the starting point we've seen, right, is a lot of the you know, whether it's derogatory term or not, I don't know, but the break fix sort of traditional VAR sort of IT, you know, service provider that's done, you know, that's got a contract for some basic services to a customer and on demand or on demand versus proactively. And a lot of those guys have changed, you know, maybe they've added firewall basics, or maybe they've added some other antivirus, a couple different things that they can add into their mix. But I think, you know, kind of back to this chart, right? If there's three things, you know, that they really can get them into that mode of really providing a more intelligent, a more secure managed service of their business, right? It's these three things. And I don't know if one's before the other. I wouldn't necessarily, I don't think there's a priority here besides doing all three of these. And that's, I know, you know, Juan, again, you can't protect what you don't know is there, right? You can't protect and you can't be proactive if you don't have the visibility into seeing what stages those things are in, right? There's different tools that you can identify an IP address, whoop, big whoop, right? That doesn't do anything, right? You got to be able to go into that IP address and look and see. So these three elements here, I mean, this is, you know, whether you got a sophisticated stack or not, I think every MSP today has to really redefine and rebuild their strategy around these three pieces.
And I agree. You know, one of the big things, I mean, if you take a look at, like, let's just go back to some of the education that we received in the past, right? For anyone that's taken like a Security Plus or, you know, any type of cybersecurity certification, the last thing that you do in any cybersecurity, you know, best practices test question is educate the end user, right? So if I'm looking at how I'm going to stop this threat and this risk, right? Because all of these things are things I have to do in the identification. I have to make, you know, I have to identify it, I have to, you know, assess it, I have to remediate it, and then I have to go back, report on it, and then I have to actually educate the end user on it. But if I turn that upside down and I look at it from the other way and I say, if I do this simple thing first, which is educate the end user, my chance of remediating all of those other steps are high, right? Because I'm doing the thing that I have to do anyways first, right? Rather than waiting for something to happen to be reactive, which is what we're doing now. And most likely we're not probably educating the end user at the end of that. We're probably just fixing it and just saying, all right, hey, cool, they'll call us again next time. But we're forgetting that last step. But now if we kind of say, okay, well, what if I did teach that person how not to do that? I might be able to actually stop doing a lot of these noisy tasks, and I might be able to start focusing on bringing additional value, which is this transitionary period that we're starting to see where, you know, these, you know, types of technology solution providers are going to MSP, and then they're starting to look at more MSSP, or maybe they're looking at just staying, you know, wherever they're at. But at least then they've addressed the situation in a way that it's, you know, self-preserving for the end user customer, but also for their organization as well. So, you know, for me, I think the first step is, and again, all of these are a requirement. I don't know that any of them come first, but if I'm looking at the hierarchy and saying, okay, if I'm reactive and I want to be proactive, the first thing I want to do is teach them how not to do it. And then I can work on all these other layers all the way through and educate them on these other pieces as well. So, John, what's your thought?
I'm going to amp, you know me, I'm an education guy. Like I have to agree with you, but I will look at it from a different lens in the sense that you need to train your end user and your, you need to also train the organization on how to think about these problems. You know, Stu, you mentioned you just drag them along. And I think one of my most impactful stories once I started getting out of my MSP that I was in, the world that I was centered in, what I thought was all right, was hearing, you know, Matt Lee talk about Iconic and the fact that it wasn't an option. And well, now I think I'm getting my stories mixed up. Juan, you got to smile.
No, you got it right, Matt. That was his mantra. We agree on that. Me and him both know that did that.
But it was this concept of, you know, this isn't an option. I'm not providing services to you unless you believe in me. And I think that's why the education piece is so important, because there has to be a trust layer there for them to pay you more. Like, you don't just pay your accountant more because you feel like it. No, you pay your accountant more because you trust them to be doing the best job that they can. And any service provider is built foundationally on trust. And to build trust, you have to build education. or you have to provide education rather. So once they're educated, then you can drag them along, and they're willing to pay a premium because there's a trust there and because they know that you know what you're talking about. So it's more than just education of the end user and how not to make mistakes on clicking in emails and things like that. It's education of the global situation in which we're in which every organization is no longer impervious. It's not because you're a small company that you don't have to care. Like, you're just an IP in the ether space. I don't care if you're Apple company or if you are, Bob's Motor Shop. Like, you're being attacked indiscriminately. And so taking that education a step further and then pulling them along and saying, we're bringing cyber because I'm de-risking my company and de-risking your company. You trust me, you're coming along. And I do think you probably have to look at leaving some people behind. Is just like anytime you grow, whether it's your career, your pathway, your life, like anytime you grow, not everything can grow with you. You have to look at it that way.
Well, again, it's protecting your own business is part of that, right? I mean, you're trying to grow it, but if your customer is going to potentially hurt your business, then they don't need to be a customer anymore.
I want to double click on what you said there real quick, John, because you said trust. And one of the things is I talk about this in my cybersecurity sales masterclass, where I talk about knowing the no. And a lot of times some of the no that we get from a customer is, no, I don't see myself being successful with you. But if I had a comprehensive stack, similar to what we see here on the screen, right? We got awareness, visibility, and we can show you identity and all these things. I have a way to prove to you about how risky you are. All of a sudden I start to build that level of trust, right? I have the right tools, I have the right approach, and then you start to get that trust, like, okay, I can see it now, right? And if I can see myself being successful with you because you have visibility into things and you have the opportunity to protect me from it, but you also have the opportunity, you're going to step further and you're educating me about it. Those are really great ways to step forward to build that layer of trust, right? And that's where I think, to your point, Stuart, when you say what are some of the things MSPs can be doing, it's just thinking about what do customers need? Like, what do they really need? Right now they need a trusted provider. So the word trust, when you said it, was so synergetic. I was like, we got to tap on that a little bit, because if I just sell you a product, that doesn't mean that I trust you. And that's probably the no you get when they say, no, I don't want to do business with you. It's not that they don't need tech. It's not that they don't need security. It's not that they don't need visibility. It's just, you didn't show me enough to show me that I want to be successkind with you.
Piece of that is knowing their business, right? And knowing what their requirements are. Kind of keep thinking back to the BMW case and others, where it's the supply chain back, right? It's not your customers, but it's your customer's customer that's going to be adding requirements. And so you need to be able to go to them and say, you know what, these guys are going to come to you, maybe not this month, but somewhere down the line, they're going to require you to be doing these things. If you're not being proactive, they're going to go find somebody else to buy that stuff from.
Sure.
Or, so it's following through. And again, it's another element of the trust build.
I love it.
So maybe, it reminds me of a conversation, right? I thought about the BMW one this morning. The other one, we had a conversation with an MSP literally the other day. And a year ago, they had probably 10,000 assets that they had under management. They had about 1,500 that they were doing continuous vulnerability management for. They used another, vulnerability management tool that they ran for about 1,000 devices once a month for some of their clients. And they had 7,500 devices that they had no continuous vulnerability, no vulnerability management at all, yet enough continuous for. And that was, 12 months ago. And when we talked to them last week, they said, yeah, we know we got to get around to that, or we have a huge exposure. And it's fascinating to me that none of those small businesses have left them. And it's also amazing to me that none of those small businesses have been picked off by somebody else, right? Another MSP, which gets back to your trust factor. They probably stick around because they trust them and because they have a personal relationship. But at some point, they've got a business risk that is compelling, right? And the need to do something. If you're the SMB owner, the investor, the board member, the outside counsel, whoever it might be, it would seem to me that starts to drive more of the behavior. And Juan, I'll leave it to you, and then we'll wrap around to some closing comments. But do you see MSPs starting to feel that pressure to do something?
Yeah, I think overwhelmingly, right? I mean, I'm here at ConnectWise Share, and this is probably the room is packed to the max, standing room only. And it's not because they're here because we're talking about the same old thing. We're here talking about the new world, right? And you know, I was at another event yesterday, packed to the max, cybersecurity centric. I was at another event recently, last week, packed to the max, right? And it's because everyone knows we need to be doing something. Now it's a matter of what do we need to be doing? How do we need to be doing it? What's the way that we could do it carefully and consistently? How do we actually make money at it, right? So to your point, resoundingly, yes, I am seeing that. I'm hearing it from everywhere. Everybody knows they're doing something, and they are. I think a lot of them are doing something. My caution is they need to be doing it slowly and smartly, right? Don't run into this race. It's easy to get caught up in, okay, let's just run and do this. But this is that moment where we have to be very, 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 very careful about this and understand what we're doing. And I think that these three things right here, identity, visibility, and awareness, give us the insight into those opportunities so we know where we're stepping next.
Yeah.
You know, one of the danger zones is walking off of a diving board, not knowing how deep that water is, right? Well, if you're on a diving board, it's probably more than 12 feet deep. And if you don't know how to swim, you probably got a problem. And that's where I think, you know, everyone's just like, it looks fun when you dive in, but if you don't know how to swim, you're going to get in trouble, right? And you're going to need to be saved. And that's where you don't want to end up. So caution for MSPs is just to do it slow, know what you're doing, get into it, understand your opportunity, understand your liability, step slowly into it, implement frameworks. Don't get too deep into it. Don't start, you know, jumping into like major tech stuff unless you're ready for that. But yeah, that's my
a little bit of the crawl, walk, and run, right? You
absolutely.
got to get there, and you'll get there, but it's
We
yeah.
do have to
So-
crawl fast though.
Yeah, exactly. You got to start crawling.
Yeah, we have to start crawling.
John will let you provide kind of a closing remark. We got a minute or two, and then we'll let Frank wrap it up, and I think we'll go from there.
Sure. It's hard to really top what Juan said, but I think if I walked away with this with one like key takeaway, I can't tell you the amount of importance leveraging a framework is in making this decision. You know, we're working with the CompT Ecosystem Council for SaaS right now, and you gotta stop doing the shiny object syndrome. You gotta align to the framework. You gotta double check that you're not already doing something that falls into this category. It's easy to spend. I mean, I watch the data. SaaS sprawl's crazy. It's easy to buy a bunch of things because you get sold and you get excited and energized about the next problem you're solving. But to Juan's point, like, think about the next problem you're solving and how it matures. You don't need to check IG3, you know, all 6 boxes of IG3 when you don't even have IG1 under the CIS controls. So if you're looking for a crawl, walk, run, look at a framework. Start at the beginning, move towards the next steps. I think you'll find that this framework here, what we've got visualized here, is not framework rather, but this graphic here represents a lot of what we're talking about in those frameworks.
And honestly, it represents a lot of what's in the frameworks, right? I mean, it's there. It's just sort of summarized at this level, but if you look at it, it's a lot simpler to look at these three things and then, you know, dive into, okay, awareness. What can I do simply to get started on awareness? Okay, contact Juan, HacWare, and, you know, offer, you know, internally to your own company, but also, you know, make it a program and enablement to your customers, right? Visibility, know what's there, identify it, and look closely. So, you know, this is a good key point that I think a lot of us and a lot of MSPs need to really drive home and get started with. So maybe Stuart, if you want to just sort of put up the, you know, how people can contact Juan and John and myself.
Yeah, we're literally at the top of the hour. So I will, anybody that wants to contact any of these folks, send that to us, and we will make sure that information gets out to any one of them. Feel free to contact us that way. We also have a couple of upcoming webinars I talked about in our ongoing series. We're talking about QRadar in a couple of weeks and how QRadar is now helping small businesses. So it used to be an enterprise only play, but for small businesses that are using QRadar, now how continuous vulnerability management fits into that. If you're interested in a demo or a peer Q&A session, we have that coming up as well. And if you're part of seven-figure MSP, you have the opportunity to attend those open office hours sessions. So with that, I just want to thank everybody for attending. Once again, if you want to contact Juan or John, you can reach them through us. If you two want to give your quick email address, that's fine, but we're a minute over and I want to be cognizant of everybody's time. So with that, I just want to thank all of you for attending. Juan, if you got an email address you want to tell us.
It's Juan, Juan at HacWare.com, HACWARE.com.
Thanks. John?
J Harden, JHARDEN at Auvik.com. Love to chat.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks all three of you very much for this.
Thanks,
We're
guys.
a minute over. We apologize, and we'll see you on our next session. Have a great day.
Cheers, guys.